Welcome. Today, I want to talk to you about something you may have been feeling for a long time, even though you never quite found the right words for it. The feeling of not fitting in completely, of being too intense, too sensitive, too critical, of thinking that you are too much in a world that seems to demand moderation, obedience, and conformity. That feeling of strangeness, of abnormality, has often been interpreted as an individual problem, as if something were wrong with you. But what if I told you that what you feel is not a personal flaw, but the effect of a system that defines what counts as normal? What if that intensity, that difference, were in fact a sign of resistance, an indication of another way of living that is not yet recognized, but that already beats inside you? Michel Foucault devoted his life to analyzing how societies produce what they call normality. He showed that what we believe to be natural, what is expected of us, what is considered correct, healthy, acceptable, is in fact the result of a history, of politics, of a set of apparatuses that shape us from the moment we are born. And he also pointed out that where there is power, there is resistance, that there are always cracks, fissures, leaks, places where some step out of the script and make evident that normal is neither eternal nor universal. Today, I want us to walk that path together. I want us to look directly at that feeling of strangeness, of intensity, of difference, and to understand it not as an error, but as a possibility. Let us descend into Foucault's thought to understand why you don't fit in, and why that can be your greatest strength. Power, for Foucault, is not just the force of the state, nor the visible repression of a dictatorship. It is something more subtle and deeper. Power circulates. It is in institutions, but also in everyday gestures, in words, in glances, in examinations, in routines. Power infiltrates daily life, producing what he called regimes of truth. Discourses that decide what is true and what is not, what is valid and what is false, what is sane and what is mad. These regimes of truth do not merely describe reality, they fabricate it. Think about school. It seems like a neutral place to learn, but in reality, it is a machine of discipline. Its schedules, its exams, its grades, its lines, its punishments are techniques designed to produce docile, obedient bodies useful to the system. Think about the modern hospital. It does not only heal, it also classifies. It records, archives, labels, healthy, sick, normal, pathological. Think about prison. It does not only lock up, it monitors, corrects, organizes the life of inmates minute by minute. Or sexuality. We think it was silenced, but in reality, it was the object of an immense apparatus of discourses, medical, pedagogical, religious, psychological, that examined, regulated, and administered it. All this is not natural. It is not that it has always been this way. It is the result of specific historical processes. And, if Foucault teaches us anything, it is that what is constructed can also change. Now then, what happens with those who don't fit completely into those norms? Those who ask too many questions, who feel too much, who cannot adapt to routines that seem obvious to others. Society tends to call them abnormal. It labels them as strange, problematic, even sick. But Foucault would tell us, what is happening is not that you are a mistake, but that your way of being exposes the limits of those regimes of normalization. Your difference makes visible the artificiality of what is called the normal. That is why what you often call fragility can also be a form of knowledge. That sensitivity that sometimes makes you suffer is, at the same time, an ability to perceive what others cannot see. You read the tension in a silence. You pick up the discomfort in a gesture. You detect the invisible violence of a norm. You feel everything, and sometimes you feel too much. But that intensity is also a form of effective intelligence. It is not instability. It is a radical openness to the flows of power that traverse life. The problem is that such openness without care can exhaust you. You end up carrying other people's pains, sustaining draining conversations, regulating emotions that are not yours. You become everyone's involuntary therapist, and the price is tiredness, exhaustion, the feeling of always being overwhelmed. That is why Foucault insisted on the importance of care of the self, not as narcissism, but as an ethical practice. To care for oneself is to set limits. It is learning to distinguish which burdens belong to you and which do not. It is creating rituals, spaces, times to recover, because only then does your strangeness become strength and not condemnation. Those who don't fit in are also marked by their curiosity. They do not accept what is given to them at face value. They are not content with the first answer. They ask why. Why? Must I do this? Why does this system work this way? Why do we follow rules that make us unhappy? Foucault called this gesture parrhesia, the courage to tell the truth even when it is uncomfortable, even when it may be costly. Because every deep question is a crack in the wall of the self-evident. Every radical doubt reveals that what seemed natural is, in fact, a construction. Of course, that attitude makes people uncomfortable, because it threatens the comfort of those who live inside the rules without questioning them. Your curiosity may lead others to call you negative, intense, difficult. But in reality, what you are doing is exercising the most profound right. The right not to be governed in just any way. There is also independence. Many of those who do not fit feel that they must withdraw, that they must step aside in order to breathe. And that solitude can be painful, but it is also a space of creation. Foucault would say that it is not isolation, but alternative subjectivation. That is, the construction of a way of being different from the one they want to impose on you. That withdrawal is an ethical workshop, a laboratory of experimentation where you rehearse ways of life that were not foreseen in the script. Of course, this has consequences. Friends, family, partners sometimes do not understand. They expect you to keep being who you were before. But once you change your practices, you change as a subject, and there is no going back. Think of it this way. For Foucault, the subject is not a fixed essence. It is not something you carry inside from the beginning. It is the result of practices, of discourses, of habits, of power relations. When you change what you do, you change what you are. When you narrate yourself differently, you are literally another. And that transformation may generate ruptures, but it also opens possibilities that did not even exist before. Another mark of these rare subjectivities is intuition, the ability to feel what others do not say, to read what hides in the folds of a conversation. That intuition connects with what Foucault called biopolitics, the way in which power no longer limits itself to punishing or disciplining, but manages life itself. It regulates health, birth rates, work, desires, pleasures. When you perceive that someone says, "I'm fine," but their body screams the opposite, you are reading the effects of that power in the most intimate. It is a sensitivity that can become a political tool. The risk, once again, is that you end up carrying what does not belong to you. That is why the key lies in discernment. We live in a society that turns everything into numbers. Productivity, success, followers, likes, metrics. Everything is measured, everything is quantified. This is what Foucault called neoliberal governmentality, a form of government in which each person becomes an entrepreneur of themselves. We must optimize our time, manage our emotions, sell our image, but there are people incapable of living only by those metrics. They need meaning. And that need, which the system calls weakness, is in fact a form of resistance, because it refuses to reduce life to numbers. It is semiotic disobedience, a refusal to let the quantitative erase the qualitative. That is why those who seek authenticity often live through ruptures. Others expect you to return to the version that fit, but once you have seen the artificiality of the norms, you cannot go back. It is as if you had pulled back a veil. What once seemed obvious now reveals itself as constructed, and going back to the former state is impossible. There are also those whose mere presence transforms, not because they give speeches, but because they listen differently, because their way of being creates a different space. Foucault would say they are alternative enunciation devices, places where one can speak and feel differently. But this capacity is also dangerous. It can turn into messianism, into the idea that you must save everyone, or into martyrdom, into the belief that your strangeness condemns you to suffer. The challenge is not to fall into those traps. The key lies in discernment: when to open up, when to protect yourself, when to speak, and when to remain silent. Many feel a diffuse calling, a purpose they cannot always name. For Foucault, that impulse translates into the search for ways of life. It is not about great heroic missions, but about concrete practices. How you inhabit your body, how you build your relationships, how you organize your time. It is what he called the aesthetics of existence, turning your life into a work, not in the sense of perfection, but of experimentation. Now, even strangeness itself can become an apparatus if you do not watch it. Because power is not only confronted from the outside, it also infiltrates difference. You can believe you are superior, and that arrogance isolates you. You can believe you are a messiah, and that exhausts you. You can believe you are a martyr, and that locks you into pain. The key is not to deny those shadows, but to make them conscious. Only then does your difference become freedom, and not a new prison. In relationships, this is immediately noticeable. There are those who want to absorb your energy because they have not worked on their own. There are those who feel threatened and want you to adjust. And there are those who, having done their own process, can meet you as equals. The virtue here is Foucauldian discrimination, knowing with whom to share your strangeness and with whom not to. Being strange, being different, is not an isolated privilege. It is a political responsibility, because every act of authenticity shows that what is normal is a historical construction. Foucault stated it clearly: freedom does not consist in being outside power, but in exercising power differently. And that other way is embodied in the everyday, in how you speak, how you love, how you work, how you resist. Perhaps what is strange today will be common tomorrow. Regimes of truth change, and they change thanks to those who dare to live differently. Every time you choose authenticity over obedience, you widen what is possible. Every time you prefer meaning over metrics, you break a gear. Every time you refuse to conform, you open a path. Yes, it is difficult. Yes, sometimes it is lonely, but it is also necessary. Because your strangeness not only transforms your life, it broadens what it means to be human. So remember, you are not too much, you are not broken. Your difference is not a flaw. It is the proof that normal is only a work in progress. The challenge is to embody that strangeness with rigor, with tenderness, and with limits. To practice care of the self, the courage of parrhesia, the patience of transformation, and to do it without asking permission. If you have made it this far, it is because deep down you know your difference matters. And if you want to keep exploring these ideas, I invite you to join this community. Subscribe to Project Minds, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Because what is strange today is the seed of the future. And you are part of that sowing. Do not forget, you are not too much for the world. The world, as it stands, is too small for you.